Hello again, Paul Mackey again with the One Idjit's Thoughts on Podcast and Dog Days of Podcasting Day number 22. Go to dogdaysofpodcasting.com for more information and to hear all of this year's participants. Fans of Gravity Falls know that today I have a doozy of an episode and I don't want to come up short with it, so I'm launching straight into Gravity Falls Season 2, Episode 12, A Tale of Two Stands, originally aired July 13th, 2015. Now, I failed to note yesterday the air date of Episode 11, but it was in fact March 9th, so that's a heck of a gap between any episodes, let alone these two. I did a little light Googling, as I don't want to be spoiled on anything, and found plenty of people talking about the gaps, but not why. I'm a veteran viewer of Moonlighting, so I know that sometimes production delays happen. But I'm also a veteran viewer of The Owl House, and I know sometimes Disney makes weird scheduling decisions. I'd love to know if this was a production issue or a scheduling issue. Let me know if you can. Email idjitcastpodcast@gmail.com, comment at nimlas.org, or use the comment section below if you're watching the YouTube version. Brief summary. We start out in deep childhood summer flashback of the twin Pines brothers, exploring a boarded-up cave. They tag their names on the cave wall, Stanley and Stanford Pines. After the opening credits, in Today Time, Stan goes to embrace his brother and instead gets punched. The brother points out how risky the portal restart was and pointed out the warnings Dipper saw last episode. Stan is expecting gratitude and they fight about 30 years ago. Mabel tries to intervene and Stan introduces them as Shermie's grandkids. Mabel shakes his six-fingered hand while Dipper quakes and fanboys out. The brother asks if there are any security breaches, and Stan says only the people in the room and, well, maybe the entire U.S. government. The monitor shows the government agents swarming above, and they decide they have to lay low. Mabel thinks it's a perfect setting for the tale of their backstory. The brother calls Stan Stanley, and the twins are confused, and the brother is shocked that Stan took over the name Stanford. The twins demand answers, and Seuss, in direct reference to internet fanboys all over the place, I'm sure, hopes it lines up directly with the fanfic he's already written. The flashback story begins in New Jersey, Glass Shard Beach, New Jersey, which I'm sure Jack Mangan knows well as a summer destination. The twins lived above their family pawn shop, and their mother worked as a telephone psychic. Stanford's 6 fingers were a birth defect, and he was off the charts smart. He had an obsession with sci-fi weirdness. Back to the cave from the beginning, they discovered a wrecked sailboat and salvaged it, gradually fixing it up. They get bullied, and Stanford wonders if there's a place for weirdos like him out there somewhere, but Stanley insists one day they'll sail away looking for treasure. They get called to the principal's office later on, but only Stanford is called into the inner office where his parents are waiting. The principal points out that one son is brilliant and destined for greatness, and the other, not so much. He says that all that has to happen is the recruiters from West Coast Tech, which they obviously couldn't call Stanford on this show, to see the science fair project, and Stanford is a shoo-in. Stanley hears all of this and says later that he knows Stanford isn't going to go all the way across the country, but Stanford says he is, if the recruiters are impressed. Otherwise, he'll go treasure hunting with his brother. Stanley is angry and accidentally damages the project. The recruiters are not impressed, but Stanford sees the peanuts his brothers had been eating nearby and confronts his brother over what looks like sabotage. The family overhears. Their family kicks Stanley out, saying Stanford's future used to be worth millions, but now it was ruined, and they forbid Stanley from returning until he makes a fortune. Stan tried marketing chamois wipes, but their dye ran and he was run out of New Jersey. He changed his name and tried Pennsylvania out. The series of scams was why Stan had so many fake IDs. Meanwhile, Stanford got degrees at his backup school and continued his interest in weird phenomena. He determined there was more weird phenomena in one place than anywhere else. It all centered on Roadkill County, Oregon, in the town of Gravity Falls. Stanford moved there and began investigating. He wrote his findings in a journal. Dipper interrupts to spout joy about the journals, and then Stanford continues. He had theorized the weird was leaking through from another dimension and decided to build a gateway with the help of Fiddleford McGucket. They built it and tested it, but McGucket was pulled halfway through the portal opening and saw what was on the other side that he would rather forget, and he quit the project. Stanford invited Stanley out to Oregon. When Stanley arrives, Stanford is out of it, paranoid. He shows Stanley the portal and explains it could be too dangerous to exist. Stanford has already hidden 2 of the journals, and he wants Stanley to hide the number 1 somewhere, buried somewhere no one can find it. Stan can't believe that he went all the way out there just to be told to go away again. He tries lighting journal number 1 on fire, but Stanford doesn't want his research destroyed, only hidden. They fight, a real brawl, and inadvertently activate the portal. Stanley is burned on the control panel, and Stanford approaches concerned about him, but Stan punches him. They argue some more, and Stanford is inadvertently shoved through the portal. Stan regretted it immediately, and spent weeks trying to figure out how to reopen the portal. He goes into town for food, tries to buy a 99-cent loaf of bread, and discovers he has literally a single peso coin. The townspeople gather round, though, saying he must be that weird science guy, and does he ever give tours of his experiments? He realizes he could make a little off the situation, and though a tour with no real exhibits makes the crowd angry, he wins them back with some humor, and winds up inventing humorous wacky sights for the shack. He faked a car crash to kill Stanley Pines, and became Stanford Pines, all the while continuing to try to make the portal work in the basement. Suddenly, sound from above, in the real time, makes everyone in the present realize that agents are near to discovering them. Dipper hauls out the memory gun, and Stanford modifies it till it can wipe all the agents' memories at once. Stanford goes out and pretends to be a superior officer, and dismisses them all from this false alarm. Dipper wants to ask a zillion questions of Uncle Stanford, and Stanford suggests that they call him Ford before Stan abruptly sends the kids to bed. Later, the brothers come to a stubborn agreement. Stan will watch the kids and maintain status quo above ground the rest of the summer, while Stanford works in the basement to fix anything left broken from the portal. Stanford must stay away from the kids, says Stan, and Stanford says at the end of the summer he will be restored the shack property, restored his proper name, and the mystery shack will end. Upstairs, Mabel asks Dipper if they could ever end up like the Elder Pines twins, and while they joke about who is stupider, the episode ends with her laying awake, worried. And my favorite line...
I'm Steve Bynington. Are you sick of bandages that are hard to remove? Then what you need is the Rip-Off. The Rip-Off won't give you rashes. I repeat, it won't give you rashes. It gave you rashes.
Though I almost went with the, you think you've got problems, I've got a mullet, Stanford. Who is? J.K. Simmons plays Stan's brother, who ends up being called Ford. Jonathan Kimball Simmons was born in Grosse Pointe, Michigan in 1955. The family moved to Ohio and eventually to Missoula, Montana, where his father became the director of the School of Music and where J.K. graduated with a degree in music in 1978. I'll try not to hold the fact that he's a Grizz against him. He worked in musical theater and opera and made his way to Broadway. He starred in 1987's off-Broadway production of Birds of Paradise and played Captain Hook from 1991 to 1992 in Peter Pan, before playing Benny Southstreet in the 1992 revival of Guys and Dolls. On film in the 90s, he had roles in The Ref, First Wives Club, Celebrity, and Cider House Rules, and on TV he was in Homicide: Life on the Street, Spin City, played Barbara Dan in The Adventures of Pete and Pete, and then in 1997 landed the role of white supremacist Vern Schillinger on Oz. He started to play J. Jonah Jameson in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy and has reprised that role through multiple formats, and multiple Spideys for that matter. In 2014, he starred in Whiplash as a tough band leader and earned both a Supporting Actor Golden Globe and an Oscar for Supporting Actor. Besides Gravity Falls, his voice has been everywhere, from The Yellow M&M, Anastasia, The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack, The Simpsons, American Dad, Phineas and Ferb, and most recently in a recurring role on Invincible. He will be next seen on screen in Jason Reitman's Saturday Night, playing Milton Berle. What worked? Obviously, the lightness of the previous episode was compensated by how this episode is a giant chunk of story. Almost all story, really. There was lots of genuine drama that played pretty straight, just animated a bit. Really, it could have been a live-action sci-fi drama, television show, or movie, and not seemed off at all. That backstory seemed pretty complete. I think the next episode with Fraternal Interplay can skip a lot of that backstory and get right into the present day. Things to ponder. I'm still wondering on the chicken and egg of Gravity Falls, because given enough space-time disruption from the machine, it could still be responsible for all the past weirdness of the town. Like, the gravitational anomalies could have propagated back through the timeline into the distant past and created an anomaly that gave the town its name. Or it's possible the town was weird first after all, like it's told in this episode. On an emotional level, and looking at how many episodes remain, I'm thinking we'll get maybe one more frosty episode between the brothers before thawing happens and teamwork resumes. So next time is Gravity Falls Season 2, Episode 13, Dungeons, Dungeons, and More Dungeons. Which really pretty much has to be a role-playing game coming to life, right? And probably a side quest. Oh, and hopefully there's a dragon, which had to be excluded from the title for copyright reasons. Happy hunting! You've been listening to the One Idjit's Thoughts On podcast, produced by Paul Mackey in association with Nimlas Studios. Any short clips of audio from shows is included under fair use for commentary purposes, and copyright for that content remains with its original copyright holders. The theme song is Too Good by Jack Mangan and is used by his generous permission. One Idjit's Thoughts is produced under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. You can find more episodes of this podcast and many other fine podcasts at nimlas.org. You can contact me by emailing idjitcastpodcast@gmail.com or commenting on episodes at nimlas.org. Yeah, as a Bobcat, I can throw shade at the Grizz, but I'll let the TV show throw shade at Jersey because I don't have any experience enough to have a beef with Jersey.